And look at the temple dedicated to Athena. Paul's saying these temples are incredible. As architectural masterpieces, there's nothing like them. But as a place to bow down and worship, to make your sacrifices and to ask these false gods to bless what you're doing, no, that would never work. You've built an altar to an unknown God as an insurance policy. But there's a better way. Paul begins at the beginning. He tells them that God created the world. He created the skies and the seas, and you can just picture Paul motioning down to the Aegean Sea, 6 miles away. God the Father is way too big, way too powerful, way too perfect to live in a temple, even the Parthenon. He doesn't need anything from us. We can't sway him or change his mind with our sacrifices. He's the one that's given all of us life, even our very breath. He created us to seek him. Augustine would write 400 years later, "Lord, you have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they rest in thee." The thing about this God is that he wants us to know him. He's closer to us than we are to ourselves. Paul says, in him we live and move and have our being. That's a quote from Epimenides, who lived on the island of Crete 500 years before. Some of what Paul talks about is obscure to us now. For example, he quotes from Areopagus, a Stoic philosopher who lived 300 years prior. "We are his offspring," was the quote that Paul shared. Who talks about dead poets from long ago? Well, Paul does, because he and Areopagus grew up in the same town, Tarsus. In that way he owns up to a connection with Areopagus, and at the same time, he connects with all the Stoics in his audience. So clever of him. A lot of people today love that part of the sermon. The idea that we can use the art and the poetry and the music of our time to begin this faith dialogue. And it's so true, I'm an advocate of it. But sometimes I worry that they haven't read the rest of the sermon, because Paul's about to say something that is so offensive to our modern ears, whether we're religious or pagan or spiritual. Paul says, essentially, friends, the time of ignorance is over. Paul's saying that we've lived in blindness. We've chased the wrong gods and the wrong goals. We've enslaved ourselves to deities who drive and distract us, to gods that can never give us what we most need: forgiveness. Paul says that the time is now for everyone, everywhere, to turn around and start a new life. The biblical word for this is repent, metanoia. He wants Dionysius and all the rest to start over. He's invited them to surrender to Christ. And for Dionysius, that meant powerful social position on the Supreme Court, his wealth, his education, even his family background, to give that all up and follow Christ. Paul finishes his speech by saying what he said in the marketplaces and the synagogues all over the Roman world: Jesus Christ was raised from the dead. It's not a new idea to us, but to the Greeks it was foreign. None of them believed in the bodily resurrection. The philosophers were interested in the soul, not the body. Some people scoffed and they sneered and they ignored Paul, and other people said, "Yeah, we'll hear about this later, come back again and tell us," which seems like a crazy response to a life and death invitation. But for Dionysius and a few others, this changed everything.